Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at what offensive items to buy on an AD carry and when you should pick them up. The first thing is like the general item build wise, I guess, or where your damage comes from as an AD carry. At the start of the game, most of your damage will come from your abilities, and then as the game gets later and later, you'll be relying on your auto attacks for most of your damage. The main way of increasing ability damage is just buying flat AD, like that is the thing that is going to go into the AD ratio on the ability. The main way of increasing your auto attack damage is to buy critical strike and attack speed. So for most AD carries, or even if you're just not sure what to get next, you kind of want to think of it like this, kind of just like building blocks. First, we're going to want some AD and crit as our foundation. Now we have some crit, we want to auto attack more and use it, so we need some attack speed and crit chance. That's our main damage part, like core sorted, and now we want to follow that up with some lifesteal to make sure we stay alive while killing people. Rounding it out, we can either choose between some more crit, armor pen, or defense, so that's a general idea, but let's jump into which item is best when. The first thing you're going to buy in a game will either be a Cull or a Doran's Blade. Cull is actually pretty tempting, right? You earn 400 gold, which is basically the same as a First Blood, but remember that it actually costs 450 gold to start with. Even after you sell it, you're only going to come out with 130 gold profit, which isn't amazing. I almost always recommend getting a Doran's. It's easier to fight with in lane, you have that percentage lifesteal and not just on hit, which makes a big difference when you start to crit, and you can try and get your gold lead that way. So let's just start with our foundation, the bottom layer, our critical strike. This is the bread and butter of basically any AD carry build, and they also tend to be the most expensive items. First up, Essence Reaver, and it's kind of funny how this item went from a joke to pretty much core on AD carries who use abilities. The great thing about this is that it has the same base stats as an Infinity Edge, but it also gives you cooldown reduction and some mana back. The passive is the best part. It's going to synergize with our second item, and it's also going to boost our power mid game. If you think about it, abilities are great early, and this gives us AD to boost the damage of that ability and also cooldown to use it more often. The other option is going to be Infinity Edge. This is basically the auto attack version of Essence Reaver. Reaver is great for ADs who want to do damage with abilities. Infinity Edge is great for ADs who want to auto attack. Whenever we're building any kind of crit, we're always going to want the Infinity Edge at some point, just because of the bonus crit damage. So really, if you want the most damage possible, you can't go wrong with an Infinity Edge. I'm actually going to put Trinity Force in here too. It's expensive, it has some crit, and well, I'm making the video, so just because I can. This is more of a fringe item. It has a bit of everything, and so it's one of those items where it's amazing if you can use all those little things, but very expensive if you can only use a few of them. The biggest part to working out where the Triforce is going to be worth it or not is looking at the sheen. That is by far like the single biggest boost of damage in the whole item, and the important part is how can you proc it. Champions like Lucian or Corki, for example, have low cooldown abilities, which makes proccing Sheen easy, reliable, and very consistent in a fight. Someone like Caitlyn or Tristana don't have low cooldown abilities, which would make proccing the Sheen difficult, and you wouldn't get enough use out of it to justify the gold cost. So that's kind of our foundation sorted, okay? Now let's put our first building block on top of that with some attack speed. The most common attack speed items you'll get will be Static Shiv and Rapid Fire Cannon, so let's do those two together. They're very similar anyway. Rapid Fire Cannon has 5% less attack speed, slightly more move speed, and the same crit chance. The biggest difference between the two comes from the passives, and the simplest way to put it is Fire Cannon is more single target and Shiv is more AoE damage. The passives are really what the choice comes down to. If you want to take towers and do more to a single target, then get Fire Cannon. If you want to clear waves faster and do AoE damage in a team fight, then get Shiv. The other cool thing as well to note is these passive procs actually stack, so if you get both of these items at some point in your build, then you'll have a good amount of burst when both proc together. Now while those are the most common two attack speed items you'll get most of the time, there are a few other choices that are good in kind of certain situations. Phantom Dancer used to be the king of attack speed and crit, but it's kind of fallen out of favour in season 6. PD now gives you more attack speed than the others, the same crit, but again it's the passives that kind of makes the difference. It actually has two passives, and both are really designed to duel people one-on-one. The first is great for kiting and gives you bonus move speed when around enemy champions. The second reduces an enemy's damage towards you after you hit them. PD is actually really good and underrated late game, but mid game these passives aren't going to be doing too much, and right now Shiv and Fire Cannon will be doing more damage and be more useful mid game. Runes is another very situational item, but is good on specific champions. Yeah, it makes your auto attacks AoE, and who wouldn't want that, but but there are really two important parts. It applies on hit, and it can now crit too, making this a monster item late game. The real value from this item comes from what on hit things you can apply, like this is when the item becomes super good. The best example is someone like Kalista or Kog'Maw. Kalista has her spears that will stack on multiple targets, making her do a ton of AoE damage when she uses her rend. That's the thing to think about, okay? On its own, with just auto attacks, Runin's isn't the best, and you probably want another attack speed item. But if you're adding something on top of those autos, then it can be amazing. Yumu's Ghostblade does give attack speed, and this is usually kind of a replacement for your attack speed items, so we're going to stick it in here with these. Yumu's gives you AD, cooldown reduction, armor pen, and then attack speed when you use the active. But with the active on, it's like having a shiv with a huge amount of AD and armor pen added on top, even though you don't get the crit. It's really good if you can burst people in those 6 seconds and are relying on your abilities for most of that burst damage. On someone like Graves, for example, this would make your Q and ultimate do a ton more damage. It'll even make your auto attacks do a little bit more as well, but you won't be attacking as often and you won't be critting as often either. So we have our foundation, we have our first block on top of that, and now we're going to be placing our third one on. And lifesteal items are great because it's like having some kind of defense while still increasing your damage. Yeah, it's not straight up defense, but you're going to be healing back some of the damage you do, which will let you live longer, so I'm going to count it as defense anyway. Now first up is the most common choice in Bloodthirster. This is a basic lifesteal item. It gives you a huge chunk of AD, 20% lifesteal, and the shield on top of your health total. The reason it's the most common choice is because of the crit we already have, and the fact you can't really go wrong with it. The extra AD will make your crits and abilities hit even harder, and the 20% lifesteal will mean you heal a good chunk of those crits back. If you ever aren't sure which lifesteal item to get, Bloodthirster is a very good and solid choice. Blade of the Ruined King is another option, but it only has 10% lifesteal, so you're more buying it for the passive and other stats. There are really two different reasons you choose Blade over BT. So first up is if you're against tanks. Your basic attacks deal 6% of the target's current health as bonus damage, but remember the active also does 10% of the target's maximum health, which can be like 300 damage against tanks. The other reason is the attack speed if you already have some other reason to want to attack more often. I know that sounds strange because everyone wants to attack more, but it's a particular reason like Kog'Maw's W, Kallista's E, or Vayne's W, where crit isn't where your auto attack damage is coming from. Mercurial Scimitar fits in here because it doesn't really fit anywhere else actually. If you're going to buy it, then it will normally replace your lifesteal item in your final build. To put it into perspective, it gives 10% lifesteal instead of 20, but it gives you magic resist and the QSS active to remove crowd control. The way I actually think of it is like lifesteal only works if you can attack the target. If you're being locked down and you die straight away, then the extra lifesteal on Bloodthirster isn't going to make any difference, so Scimitar will be better. If you're not getting locked down and you can attack, then you might as well just heal more by getting a BT. Death Stance is a bit of a strange item. It doesn't really fit into many AD carries builds efficiently. The problem really is simply that the other lifesteal items are more useful in one way or another. I don't think Death Stance is a bad item or anything like that, but the other choices in this category are just a little bit better. So if you want to build it, then go for it, but unless something changes, just really stick to the other three. So that is going to be like our core build in 99% of our games. We have our foundation, and then we have our two building blocks on top of that. Now we kind of just adding the luxury items on top, so like the finishers I guess, and the armor pen is the first one up. You have two choices here, and the choice actually isn't too hard to make either. Lord Dominic's Regards is the red one, and this is the one you'll be getting most of the time. Its passive is useful against almost every enemy you'll fight, as let's be honest, as an AD carry you'll have one of the lowest health totals in the game. It just means when you fight someone you're almost always going to get some kind of value out of that passive while still having the armor penetration as well. Mortal Reminder is the blue one, and unlike the other one, the passive is so situational and not really that useful against most people. Against AD carries, you can actually argue that it cuts lifesteal and is definitely the right choice against people like Nasus or Mundo. All in all, you're going to be using the Lord Dominic's Regards passive way more in general, and you can't really go wrong with it, but if you need to stop someone healing, then Mortal Reminder will be your best bet. Okay, now we're on to the kind of the random item, because this doesn't fit literally anywhere else at all. Mana Immune gets a ton of stick for being a useless item, but it's actually just just useless early, and then it turns into the Mirror Mana and suddenly becomes amazing. Mirror Mana late game is an insane item, and on the right champions can do some serious damage. The one champion I will always get this on is Ezreal. It gives you the mana regen early to spam your spells, and yeah, it does make you a little bit weaker early, but I think the trade-off is well worth it. You don't really want to get it when you're behind, but if you're ahead, then it's fine to build. I guess the way I think of it is like, can I get away with building this and not lose? If the answer is yes, then I will always do it. The damage boost you get mid to late game when it's fully stacked is crazy and definitely worth it. So those are all the items that you're going to be building on an AD carry, but going back to the building blocks, we try to get AD and crit first, attack speed and crit chance next, lifesteal, and then some more damage or some defense to top it off. So as an example, for an auto attack champion, we'll get the Infinity Edge, Shiv or Fire Cannon, Bloodthirster, and then either some more attack speed, armor pen, or defense depending on the game. For an ability based champion though, we'll get the Essence Reaver first, Shiv or Fire Cannon again, then the Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, and then defense or armor pen. The difference with this build is we're getting the Essence Reaver first because it boosts our mid game power with the abilities, and then we're actually going to be getting the Infinity Edge thrown in there as well to increase our crits even more. Those are probably the two options you're going to have in most of the games, but then we get the outliers, people who are just different and have these particular reasons to build differently, where their main damage isn't going to be coming from crits. My advice for these champions like Vayne, Kog'Maw, Kalista, Ezreal, etc. is to look up a build on a guide, then watch this video and try to work out why they are building that. Like if it makes sense, that's fine, and then if not, tweak it a little bit when you go into game. To give you an idea of what I mean, let's say the build for Vayne is Shiv, Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, and then Mercurial Scimitar. She doesn't have much ability damage, so we don't need the Essence Reaver, and so we're going to look to her W for most of her damage. That means we don't really need crit either, but we need attack speed to attack more and use her W more. Shiv and Fire Cannon is double attack speed to boost that, and it also gives you the double passive proc damage, which is great. Next up, we have loads of crit on those two items already, and a lot of attack speed, so we can get an Infinity Edge to make those crits really hurt. Rounding out the build is some lifesteal, and in this case Scimitar, because we're short range and in harm's way a lot, so we're going to have to be cleansing exhaust or the crowd control that we get hit by. Anyway, that was a really in-depth look at the offensive AD carry items, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to leave a like if you did, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll catch you in my next video.